Hello and welcome to EnvironMental with Dandelion. I'm your host, Ob. Usually Courtney's here, but she's with family today because work-life balance is important. This is our podcast where we deep dive into different aspects of sustainability and we make them accessible through amazing conversations. I'm joined today by Michael Klepacz. He is the founder and CEO of Natural Materials Unlimited. Thanks for joining us. So talk a little bit about how you got into sustainability, about Natural Materials Unlimited.
Sure. So I really got into sustainability. It was the summer. It was the summer that I had kind of a Euro trip for like 5 months. And by Euro trip, I mean I was in Poland teaching English in like 2008, 2009. And when I came back to the States, I gained all the weight back that I had lost. And I was like, what's the deal? And so I started kind of looking into our food system, like seriously, and like soil depletion and nutrient depletion and all that. And that's when I stumbled upon the fact that, well, at the time there was this company called Monsanto. Maybe it still exists. I'm not sure. I know they got bought up
they
by
do.
DuPont.
Yeah.
Okay, so they still exist, and fuck them.
Yeah.
And yeah, they invented Agent Orange, which as a veteran, I'm pissed about. And they're like the same people who are in charge of our food supply. So hooray for revolving doors and hypocrisy and all those things I could rant about for hours. But yeah, then that made me really kind of like deep dive into sustainability in general. It's going to sound a little bit silly, but cannabis kind of really also got me into sustainability. I was moving to California to try to start a medical dispensary, and I was reading a lot of books on how to properly grow medical cannabis. And I'm like, okay, this is all organic. Like it's all organic, like ideas. Like what if we can grow dank weed? Why can't we grow dank tomatoes? And so I went to a local restaurant in Ohio, which is where I'm from. And I told them, I said, hey, if I could grow your produce organically, would you switch? And they said, no, we're not going to switch because we don't want to change the flavors of our food. And that's when I officially decided to move back out west, where things were a little bit more, at least, when it comes to food, more my speed. And so that's the shorter answer how I got into sustainability.
Cool. Yeah, I also we've had a few conversations and I'm an herbalist, but I got into it also through like growing really dank weed.
Nice.
Because it's a gateway to sustainability, let's say.
It is, which is how I got into hemp today, kind of. So
Yeah, that's really cool. And you usually use hemp with Natural Materials Unlimited, or are you using I guess you're using a lot of different stuff, right?
so the goal, so historically in Europe in general, there's been a lot of wool, which we don't use wool. I guess if somebody asked us to make something from wool, we could figure it out. But the goal is to use as much hemp as possible, but it's really getting the textile varieties are really getting bought up a lot by Asia and exported and then processed over there. So we've been using a lot of linen lately for textiles, but for yarns and ropes and stuff, those shorter lengths of fiber, it's usually hemp. So um, yeah, it's a whole topic on what lengths of fibers can make what things. So yeah, Natural Materials Unlimited is we call ourselves a bast fiber company. Bast fibers are linen, hemp, nettle, rami, sisal, which is tequila. You can make tequila from agave is another word for
Agave.
sisal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's a bunch of different bast
Cool.
fibers.
Best like BEST, like
BAST.
B-A-S-T.
Bast.
I don't know what that means.
No, B-A-S-T. It's just the word. It's the family of, it's essentially, you have a stalk of a plant, and, when it's dried and you snap it in half, there's fibers that can
Yeah.
be
Okay.
spun into thread.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a massive
I
oversimplification, but yeah.
Yeah, of course. I know that like nettle, I've heard a lot of people say that nettle can make fibers because I'm an
Mm,
herbalist, so I know
yeah.
a ridiculous amount of stuff about different weeds, but I've never actually like seen it as a thing.
Mm.
Is What can you make with nettle?
Anything. So a couple of years ago, I was actually getting nettle fabric from India. And it's like super soft, right? Because like you think of nettle, and so like, as much as I know about you, we're from the, Ohio, Michigan part of the world, and there's plenty of nettle. Whereas like people in Southern California have no idea what nettle is. It doesn't grow there, right? And
No.
it's very uncomfortable. It's not like poison ivy or anything, but yeah, you can
Uh,
boil
yeah.
the leaves and make soup. You can dry the stalks and make fiber, and
Yep.
it's very soft and nice. So yeah, nettle's pretty wild, but it's a really hard fabric to find. In fact, I'm in a Facebook group that's just about nettle. It's like people in America who grow nettle in their backyard on purpose for making their own textiles at home.
Really?
Yeah, it's a
I'm
Facebook group. It's
obsessed.
it's it's really cool. They're cool
I grow
people.
nettles in my backyard for pesto, and because there's a lot of caterpillars that are born on nettle,
Oh,
but
okay,
it makes very good pesto.
nice. I love pesto. It's a go-to of
You
mine.
should you should use nettle for your pesto. You can use the nettle leaf and then dry the stalk
Wow,
for
that's cool.
fabric for
The one
fibers.
thing that we have a lot of here, and so I'm in Poland right now, and we call it babka, but it's just plantain, so broad and short plantain, and I
Yeah.
use that for making anti-itch salve, which is awesome. It's way better
Yeah.
than commercial bug shit.
Yes, it works great. Um, okay. So I guess like this is just a question about like yield of nettle and why you think like these like nettle, linen, hemp, do they have a lower yield than say cotton or something? Like how do we get into a place, do you think, where we only use such specific materials like cotton, and I guess hemp is making its way into the industry, into textiles, but it's still expensive and not very accessible.
Yeah, so that's an interesting conversation. I don't know where I want to start. I kind of want to start with like 300 years ago. So,
Yeah.
so like 300 years ago, a hemp shirt, so like all Europeans were either wearing linen, hemp, or wool. It's mostly the same for North Americans, right? Because we use the animal or vegetable fibers that were available. And so at the time, um, history lesson, you know, in
Give it.
America, we had slavery, and they had to manually pick cotton. And then the cotton gin was invented. And so that sped up the process of, cotton processing, right? Because
I
before
see.
then, we didn't have the ability to like eject the seed from the fluff. And so around around that time, as cotton started to take off, you went from having like a $400 cotton shirt and like a $1 linen shirt or hemp. I'm just going to use linen and hemp interchangeably. But I'll just say linen. Um, so you had like a $400 cotton shirt and like a $1 linen shirt, and then it swapped because, oh, and what was also interesting was because it was so hard to break, hemp into the fibers, slaves actually earned money from it. And so there were a lot of slaves that like bought their freedom through breaking hemp into fibers and producing it. And so pretty much until the 1930s, there wasn't a really great way to make hemp and linen, like super commercial, like scale. And so it became like a luxury product. And so pretty much since there was a lot of innovation between like the 1920s and 1960s for doing linen and hemp, and a lot of that actually happened in like the USSR. But yeah, so like pound for pound though, um, you can get more, fiber per acre or hectare from hemp than from cotton. Um, and what's really interesting though is that, so like Belgium and linen and France and linen go hand in hand because they're like climate's perfect for it, because not only do you need to grow the plants, but then you need to process it in the field afterwards. You have to kind of, this is called retting, so you have to break the pectins in the stalks so that the fibers can be released, and you have to do that in the field, which kind of leaches some of the nutrients back into the ground, and that you don't do retting with cotton. You're basically picking flowers. But yeah, for me, I'm putting my whole career into linen being replaced by hemp because it's more drought tolerant. But the issue too is that because linen has been so favored, machinery. So linen really only grows up to be like, let's just say 3 foot tall. It's a little bit shy of 3 feet, but hemp can grow like 20 feet tall. And so the issue that we have is that we have agriculture equipment and processing equipment that can process linen, which is short, and that same equipment gets its ass kicked by hemp because it's stronger, it's harder to work with, and the fibers are longer. And so there's a bunch of innovations that need to happen, but I think that hemp's going to come out being the winner. And there's a lot of linen specialists who agree with me with that one. That's not really a controversial idea.
Somehow I didn't know that. I knew that hemp and linen used to be much more popular, like for peasants even, but I didn't realize it was because of the cotton gin that it's not. Like, it's specifically because of slavery. We made a machine that will do it, that will pull it apart.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, so there's this book that I read, and I don't know how true anything in this book is, but it was written by a guy named Jack Herer. He was like a cannabis. Jack Herer, very famous cultivar of weed, is named after him, and he was a cannabis hero, right? And he wrote a book called The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and in the book he talked about a story where during the Prohibition period in America, so around the mid to late 1930s, when hemp was becoming illegal, whatever the Federal Bureau of Drugs or whatever at the time was called, like went up to like a farmer and was like, hey, you need to remove all these plants. And they were Polish, and they were met with like guns, America style, right? And they're like, what do you mean? Like, how are we going to make, like, this is what we use to make our clothing. Like, how can you make this plant illegal? This is how we make our clothes.
Yeah.
And so, very interesting story.
Whoa. Yeah. And now, okay, so that's like, wow, that's really, really interesting. And now you are kind of going back in time, but you just said that there's not a whole lot of machinery that can work with hemp, or is that like new machinery that needs to be made? Or is it like the same machinery as with linen, except for it just needs to be heavier duty and taller?
It pretty much, so from what I understand, and it's one thing that I'm trying to get into, it's basically the same machinery, but there just needs to be modifications to it so that it can work out. And so from what I understand, the same machinery that can do hemp can do linen, but the same machinery that can do linen cannot do hemp as well. So,
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you know the plants, it makes sense. because hemp is heavy duty.
Right.
And is it the same with nettle?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't actually know much about the processing of nettle. I assume that I know that you still have to do retting.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they're like a nice, like creamy white color fiber, whereas like hemp is more brown
Yeah.
and linen is more kind of like blonde brown, kind of dirty blonde, I guess. But it really depends, right? Like you can do water retting, which makes the fibers turn lighter with hemp and linen. So there's a
Mm.
bunch of different ways, or you can use peroxide. So hydrogen peroxide is used for bleaching.
Oh,
But yeah,
that's
I don't know.
nice.
I don't know too much about nettle as
I'm just gonna
as
keep
your.
randomly asking you questions about nettle because I like that plant. Um,
I wish I knew more.
and I've just never talked to somebody that's actually like held like a nettle shirt or something because it's not common. I knew it was possible, but to me it's like possible, and it's something that all of the, old herb books have in it. That's possible,
Hmm.
but not a thing that's happening.
Right. Yeah, it's really hard. So there's a company in India called Boheco, and yeah, they were. Now I think they're called like the Bombay Hemp Company or something like that. But they have a really they had at the time a really great system. This was like 2016, 2017. They had a great system where they were working with natives, like local natives,
Mm-hmm.
so like artisan local natives. So you would have, people in poor parts of India where all these things are growing wild. I mean, hemp comes from India, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and they would be like the yarns. If I were in my um, warehouse right now and could show you some like hand spun yarns from India, you'd be like, wow, this is crazy. It's pretty cool.
That is really cool. Okay. So natural materials unlimited, you do textiles with several different, but you also do paper. And
Mm.
we had another conversation about paper products and breaking into a treeless paper industry. And I'm kind of interested in the pushback that you were experiencing from the
Yeah, the paper
paper
man.
man.
So there's been a couple of different pushbacks. So for me, you know, I think I think I can speak for the audience. We've all seen like the hemp toilet paper meme, like hemp toilet paper is great. There's no hemp toilet paper. Like there's none. There was one guy who was producing it. I forget what his name is. He was making it in China. It didn't turn out to be a good quality or something. Um, and so, like my holy grail at this moment would be to actually make hemp paper toilet paper. That'd be cool. But there's been so with the pushbacks though. Um, so a couple of years ago, well, we would hear things like, oh, Bible pages and rolling papers are all made from hemp paper, which is true. Like you can get hemp paper from Spain, you can get hemp paper from France, but I wanted to kind of get hemp paper locally, like what's up? And so I went and talked to a couple of paper companies, and they just said, we're not going to do it because the warranties on our machines aren't covered by anything other than wood pulp. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to argue with that. It felt like the time, like I called like the vinyl company in Tennessee, like the original company that produces vinyl. And I said, hey, do you think we can make some hemp plastic records? And they're like, absolutely not. And I was like, oh, why? And they're like, because if it destroys our machines, they're irreplaceable. And I was like, okay, well, have a good day.
That's
So
fair.
there's
Yeah.
just sometimes where someone just puts a blockade in front of your path. And you're like, okay, well, I'm going to drop this subject for a while. And so that was one thing. And then another thing was we did finally find a company that was like, okay, yeah, cool. It would be great to do non-tree pulp, right? So because at this time, about 90% of the world's paper is made from wood. The rest is made from other, right? which is a huge flip again from 300 years ago, where like nothing was made from, like there was no, I have no idea the real numbers, but like it was not easy to turn an oak tree or a pine tree into paper 300
Yeah.
years ago. You know what I mean?
No.
300 years ago it was all rag paper. So it was like your shirt was old, you sold it to the mill and they boiled it and beat the hell out of it and turned it into paper. You know, like that's how paper was made.
Right, because your shirt was made out of hemp.
Right. Your shirt was made, well, I mean, yeah, your shirt was made out of linen or hemp, which is cellulose, right? So pulp
Right.
is cellulose, linen is cellulose, hemp is cellulose, paper is cellulose. And so
Right.
yeah, you just have to like heat it and then add some, potash or whatever, boil it and beat it and then, put it through the screening process and calendaring and then poof, you have paper. But yeah, so they said to us, they're like, yeah, we would switch to non-tree pulp tomorrow if you could find us 80,000 hectares worth of hemp. They're like, find us 80,000 hectares, which let's just say is like, you know, 80. We'll just call it like 170,000 acres, right?
Mm-hmm.
For
It's a
non-hectare
lot.
thinking people. It's a shitload. It's more than what's currently being grown on the planet. Like there is not that many acres of hemp being grown collectively on the entire planet at this moment, and that's just one paper mill. And one paper mill is, so the big paper mills are basically like it's all or nothing. So, if they have the ability to produce 20 tons of wood pulp a day, they can't exactly clean out all their machines, stop their 24/7 process, switch over to hemp for one cycle, wash it all
Right.
out, and go back to wood once a year. You know what I mean? And so that's
Mm-hmm.
why you have, these places in Spain and France who basically have like the monopoly on hemp pulp making, or I should say like non-tree pulp making in general. There's not a lot of information. The information is hard to find. The mills don't want to write you back. They have their own channels they're working with. And so, you know, and language barriers. That's always fun.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think we both know a little bit about language barriers.
indeed.
And what about like I don't know, there's a lot of big players here. We're talking about a history lesson that started with um, the industrial, like the creation of the cotton gin, or this like industrialization of being able to like create these textiles, or being able to process a wooden tree. There's a lot of like subsidies and energy and I guess like its own version of history, like kind of shoved into this, like, I guess, revolution of creation. What does it feel like when you're challenging that? Is it because that's what you're doing, right? You are literally, it's a radical act to be challenging something that we operate as status quo. When you are like, actually, this paper that you're making, it's like it's not great. We have another option.
Right.
What does it feel like to be in that position kind of all the time? Because that is what you are doing with textiles, with
The
paper, with.
so the word that I wrote down because I wasn't sure how long you were going to talk was dogma. That's
Okay.
the first word. So like outside of like maybe some like scary mafia shit, like I've heard some stories, but the first thing that really comes to mind besides, the boogeyman is dogma, right? And so I went to Polytechnica would be like the technical university of paper making here in Poland.
Okay.
And we wanted to talk to a professor there because we're like, hey, we have this material, we want to turn it into pulp, right? But like
Yeah.
the most basic form of pulp. And he was just so like bathed in the dogma of pure white cellulose, pure wood cellulose, wood processing, wood this, wood that. And And it's like, from what I understand, and again, there's a language barrier stopping me from being able to really look into it, but apparently in China, they take whole straw. Like there are like a big percentage of that 10% of non-tree paper comes from China and India. Why? They have the most people, and so they need paper, and they don't necessarily need the highest quality paper. They just need something to write on in some cases, and that's not me saying that. That's me saying that through a person from there, because the
Mm-hmm.
professor that I talked to, whose colleague is from China, she's here in Poland, and the professor said to her basically like, what do you mean you're processing the entire straw? You're going to get a low quality paper. And it's like, low quality paper is better than no paper in some cases.
Yeah, but also, what does that mean? Low quality paper.
So like,
I
so
guess it
li-
goes
so
back to
li-
your dogma of
it's the
yeah.
dogma. It's pretty much it's the dogma of lignin, right? So lignin is, without diving super nerdy into it, it's basically the shell around cellulose that makes wood hard, right? And so, or at least that's
Okay.
what they taught me in college. Um, and so the paper making, the pulp making process is the unsustainable part of paper making, right? So transforming wood chips into a heated slurry and then chemically stripping away the lignin, which
Mm-hmm.
later just gets incinerated, because there are now starting to become use cases for lignin, but historically
Mm-hmm.
speaking, since like 1880 or whatever, when we've invented the craft pulping process, lignin has just been incinerated because we didn't know what to do with it. And so um, that's kind of part of the dogma. Like we need low lignin, pure white cellulose. Otherwise, it starts to degrade. And by degrade, I mean, like, so think about your old coloring books when you were a kid. Are
Mm-hmm.
they the same color they were when you bought them? No, they've probably like gotten a little yellow or a little brown or whatever. It's because it was made with low quality paper, because
I see.
kids don't care, like about what they're coloring on. So they're made with the lowest quality paper. And so, but then when you have archival quality paper, it's low lignin, it's no acid paper. And so then you have, paper that you will view it in 200 years and it will look very close to how it was when it was produced. And yeah, so that has to do
Um,
with the acidity of the pulp and lignin. So it's all about the lignin. But cardboard has 16% lignin. And I know cardboard boxes, I've met cardboard boxes that are like 50 years old that still hold stuff. So
yep. Met cardboard boxes. Is there a paper mafia?
I've heard there is. I've heard there is. There's a person in Poland who was attempting years ago to make some hemp paper with European Union funding, and the short story is that some South American company who has power somehow can influence certain governmental agencies to come and constantly um, give you like safety tests and all this other stuff until you're just not in business anymore.
Until you're not.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk about the mafia for a second. So what was his name? William Randolph Hearst or whatever. I don't remember
Yeah.
if he's my cannabis history is not the best, but what he was either the guy who was the anti-drug czar or whatever, or America, or he was the one who owned the forests and owned the newspapers and then helped peddle the misinformation. But that's basically what happened. So like the Germans figured out how to turn forests into newspaper, and the newspaper owners who owned forests wanted to turn their forests into newspaper. And hemp, which was, at that time in the 20s and 30s, they finally figured out how to, scale up and make good things from hemp. It was a threat. So, you know,
Yeah.
they spoke out against, I always get shit for saying this, but they, you know, so I'll just say it in the nice way. They made Mexicans and black people the boogeymen, you know, with their some of, you know, some of these faux documentary, like weird, you know, oh, my wife's going to go to a jazz club and fall in love with a black guy, that kind of bullshit. And then all of a sudden cannabis is illegal because people, you know, you create a fake boogeyman, and then
Yeah.
people beg to be saved, and now
Yeah.
cannabis is illegal, and the wood is the king of paper, and that's why.
Yeah. I mean, that story is played out over and over and over again by people who are really good at propaganda. Herbalism is the same. It
Right.
was people were not going to the doctor and getting pharmaceutical drugs because they were going to their local herbalist when they had a cold. Um, and she was she was giving herbs and not medicines, and they wanted people to be on pharmaceutical medicines, so they funded a whole propaganda campaign against herbal medicine. And now it is still illegal in the United States and a lot of places to practice herbalism and you can't get a degree, you can't get insurances around it. Like, it's a whole thing. Thank you, pharmaceutical industry.
You know, it's the same thing that we're going through right now in Poland, specifically with like cannabis, right? Because like, so the thing about pharmaceuticals versus herbalism, and I'm not going to like take either side, is dosage, right? And
Yep.
so like you and I know, at least I'm going to assume that, you know, like 25% of all pharmaceutical medicines are plant-based. But yeah, I mean, aspirin came from willow, you know that,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, and
And so
meadowsweet.
then,
Yep.
yeah, and it's like, I mean, you can, if we want to get a little bit nerdier, like you can crush up some aspirin in a shot glass of water, and you can put cuttings in that and use it as rooting compound. Or you can take branches from the willow tree and boil it and make rooting compound from that, because it comes from the same thing. It's got the same stuff
Mm-hmm.
in it.
Yeah,
And so,
salicylic acid.
is that what it is? Is that what
Yeah.
makes rooting compound?
Yeah, that's what they distill from all those years. Now they make it. It's totally fake,
Synthetic,
but
right?
now it's synthetic. But yeah, it's the salicylic acid that's in it.
Okay. So yeah,
Yeah.
so in general though, that's what the doctors are saying, that's what the politicians are saying. Like, it's all about dosage. You know what I mean? Like, how can an herbalist, or how can somebody who has cancer, you know, when there's, you know, thousands of varieties of different cannabis, you know, like lemon haze versus Jack Herer versus Skywalker OG Kush, whatever, you know, something's good for headaches, something good for mood, something's good for, you know, pain. And it's just what about dosage? And that's what the herbalists, I mean, I don't consider myself an herbalist, even though I know a lot about it. But yeah, it's like, so my wife is a scientist, like she's all about that chemistry, and we're always arguing about it. It's she wants science to save her, and I'm like, just put some coconut oil on it, just put some popcorn on it, just you know,
Yeah.
boil some dandelion roots, just, you know, something, you know what I mean? And it's like, or when COVID happened, I'm like, oh my god, this year I got so much Giovanna, which is the what was it called in English? I sent it to you the other day. This cowboy toilet paper, Mullen.
Mullen. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's Mullen in English. I forgot the name.
You
Um,
call it Giovanna in
Giovanna. Yeah, that's Polish. And
okay.
so right before COVID, like I had just coincidentally, like I got bags of it, and I had a ton of it. And so like, okay, COVID's around, and it's like a lung
Yeah, you're
disease, and the
like,
lungs are
I'm
gonna hurt.
safe.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't gonna like stop COVID, but if I did catch COVID, it would at least help recover from it, because it's like scientifically proven. Everybody go look up Mullen,
Yeah.
Mullein, or IEN. I'm not
EIN.
sure.
It is
Yeah.
EIN. It's the thing. Yeah.
There are like
It
case
doesn't.
studies about this plant and lung health.
Yeah.
So
Yes. It's great. Yeah. Dosage. I mean, I hear that. I also hear like what makes you feel better makes you feel better. And
true.
maybe doesn't kill all the bacteria in your body. Start there. Just start
That's a big
there.
deal. That's a big deal.
We don't
That's a
have,
big deal.
yeah, we don't have we don't have to hurt ourselves or like be anti-pharmaceuticals. I'm not anti-doctor and pharmaceutical, but I never start there.
Right. Right. Yeah, totally. I think, for some people who don't know the term, it's all about the LD50 level, right? So like the LD50 level of poppy in the form of opium is pretty low versus cannabis versus like, is there an so for sure there's an LD50 level of water, like we've heard of there was a radio contestant in California who they had like a water chugging contest and she overdosed on water and died. you
Mm-hmm.
know like, so you can't overdose on weed. You can probably overdose on dandelion root extract, but like how much? And really,
Probably.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah. You'll
everything
probably
can be
overdose on the
toxic.
alcohol that makes the legal alcohol that makes the tincture or the extract before you overdose on the extract, but that's besides the
Right,
point.
right, right. Just like you would die from the smoke inhalation from the world's largest telephone pole-sized joint of industrial hemp before you caught a buzz.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Do you see a lot of like being in the hemp world, do you have to weed through a lot of like, I guess, weed puns and jokes and people always being like, "Oh, you smoking your product? Can I smoke your shirt that you made?" And
It's literally what they say. Yeah. Yeah. Like, I think so. Like, it doesn't help that like a lot of the hemp stuff that you find always has like a weed leaf on it. Like
yeah.
the stuff that I make, I want soccer moms to want it. That's what I want. You know what I mean? So like nothing that I make has a weed leaf on it, or like I have a hemp t-shirt and it just says hemp, and then it's got a weed leaf and a fist in front of it. And I didn't buy it, it was given to me, and I wear it to trade shows sometimes. But like not everybody wants to be an activist, and no, you can't smoke my fucking hat.
No. I mean, you can, but it's not going to do anything for you.
Yeah, I've heard that so many times. "Hey, can I smoke your hat?" No, no, you can't smoke my hat. And you know what's even worse though is that like, so the US imports, like, so before the farm bill, when hemp became legal to grow again in the US, before the farm bill, the US was importing like 60% of all things hemp. And so, and that's the thing too about my business is I've never been in the gray area of like medical or CBD or Delta, whatever, something that's going on. I've never been in these gray areas. I've always been dealing with textiles, And so, but what's
Mm-hmm.
really funny though is that like occasionally you will have to like sign a paper that says this hat is definitely made from industrial hemp and it's not going to get you high. But it's like, look, even if you were to somehow make a hat from the dankest weed plant, like the stalk is not where the THC is. Like the
No.
THC is primarily in the flower. It's on these
Yep.
little microscopic, super sexy little spikes that grow on the flower
Yep.
itself. It's not in the fiber. I mean, there's some, but it's barely detectable. So
Yeah.
that's a whole nother conversation, is me being pissed about the THC caps on industrial hemp. I think that we're doing ourselves a huge disservice. Like, like so many farmers around the world every year get fucked because their hemp went hot and the cops are like, "Hey, your THC levels are too high, you're going to jail." Cool.
That's ridiculous. So I guess then the question I hate that. Just got re-mad. Okay. I guess then the question would be like, wouldn't it be the most sustainable thing to make to have like the THC. I mean, like I grow weed because I think it's a really beautiful plant. So I just grow it in my garden. I live in the Netherlands, and that's a really big, like, exciting thing that we just can do. But it seems like if I could just take the stock of that and turn that into a textile if I had enough. My one plant's not going to do that, but wouldn't it make sense, since we use it as medicine anyway? And, just like mullein, cannabis has probably way more case studies than any other herb that it is effective for all sorts of like physical ailments. Would it make sense to just like grow the medicine and then use the rest of the plant to like make our textiles? I mean, I'm asking you, but
the short answer is you can't. I mean, you really can't.
Why?
Because so as an herbalist, you know what happens when you grow your tomato. So we'll just talk about tomatoes, right? So like, how many tomato plants should you have per square foot?
Like 2.
What happens if you do 20?
Oh yeah, they don't flower. They don't do stuff. Yeah, okay.
Right. So when you're growing, and this is not the real numbers, but like, so when I'm in like Humboldt County, California, you can literally see one single cannabis plant that's the size of a freaking Hummer. It's just one plant, and it's like that big around at the base. It's literally like a Christmas tree, but like it's a weed Christmas tree, and it's amazing. And it has like a ton of flowers on it, right? And so, that, the non-flower biomass absolutely could be turned into pulp for cellulose.
Okay.
For sure. But when you're growing for textiles, the seed rate per acre, you could say, is so high that like the stalks, like towards the top, are like thinner than my pinky, and it's just one huge stalk that's 20 feet tall, and they're 3-4 inches apart, like they're just. And so there is a little bit of flowers on top, there is a little bit of seeds on top, but it's essentially like useless, so because you have to like let the plant die in place and then kind of get moldy and gross before you can break the fibers. That's why.
Because that's the retting process.
Yeah. So you can't dual crop.
I see.
Yeah. That's the short.
That makes sense.
It's the long answer, short answer.
You can't like yeah, I see. Your yield is, or your like goal is different, so the cannabis plant is going to do something different.
Yeah.
Depending on what you're growing it. Yeah. It's an amazing plant.
Yeah. So my tomato talk worked.
Yeah, I get it. It's really good. Cool. So, do you have any examples of the stuff you make with you? Or do you want to talk about what you make?
I mean, yeah, let me
just to show.
Just move the microphone. So this is actually something that I'm the most proud of. Here, I'll move the microphone back. Sorry, you guys, about the microphone sounds. So this is webbing, and the lighter colored one is linen, and the darker colored one is hemp. I don't know if my camera's gonna play.
Yeah, it looks great.
So I actually just put an article on my website the other day, naturalmaterials.eu, 100 ways to use webbing, which took forever. It was a lot of fun. But so we've made from webbing, so we can produce webbing that's between 10 and 75 millimeters wide. And there's a bunch of different things to use it for. So like one guy wanted webbing. He wanted like 75 millimeter webbing because like, you remember those like vintage camping chairs we had when we were kids, and they had like they were
Yes.
weird colors, and they were like aluminum with the plastic arms and the fabric, but it was like plastic
Yeah.
fabric made out of like woven belts. Remember
Yeah.
those? So that's
Yes.
webbing, right? So then he wanted to
Yeah.
make those, but with linen belts.
I
Um,
want one of those.
right? Be fun. We also have here a guitar strap made
That's
from,
very cool.
um,
Is that hemp?
yeah. So that's a vegan friendly guitar strap. We've done with like the webbing, we've done yoga straps and dog leashes and dog accessories and stuff. There's a couple, we do a lot of white labeling, right? So there's different brands. There's some companies that buy these things and they want their brands put on it and they want to go eco. So, if anybody knows anybody at like Didario or Ernie Ball or Fender or whoever, I will totally make them some eco guitar straps. That'd be cool. So yeah.
That's cool. And you're primarily working on webbing right now, right? But you can also do like the baby carrier uh
Yeah. So we do,
wraps.
so a lot of people kind of get confused because I tell people that like we make products from textiles and paper, and then they're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
so you make textiles and paper? And I'm like, no, if I made textiles and paper, I would be in Thailand right now on vacation because I'd be a billionaire. Like I'm not a mill. Mills take serious cash to start and run, which is actually kind of something that we're trying to do right now with European Union money. But so what we do is we work with mills to get materials made for us. So, woven textiles, knitted textiles, non-woven materials, um, yarns, rope, thread. I actually don't know where the barrier between like thread, yarn, string, rope, cable is, but there's different nomenclature
But my
for
brain
things.
definitely just like my brain knows that difference. Like because every
Right.
time you said something, I was like beep beep beep. I
Right,
can
right,
picture
right.
it,
So like
right?
you have like one thread and then many threads make a yarn, and then many yarns could make a string, or maybe many strings, maybe a string and a thread are the same. I don't know. But for sure multiple yarns make a rope, and then more ropes make a cable.
Yep.
that's that's how my brain thinks of it. Um but yeah, so basically someone's like, hey, we want something that's textile based, can you make it? And so then we're like, okay, well, how thick of a textile do you want like a summer weight linen, or do you want like some heavy duty canvas? Maybe they want something that's like, two threads of linen and one thread of cotton going back and forth, like they want some cool blend, and they want custom dyeing or something, and then we get it produced for them. And so we're kind of trying to act right now as like the gateway between Polish manufacturers and the West, essentially, because like we are a small company, and like we do have sewing machines and warehousing and capabilities, but we can't do everything. Like the the guitar strap's a great example. Like that is art. Like doing
Mm-hmm.
that is art. And so without like these super vintage machines, um, and all of these other things, you can't make something that is made from leather or mushrooms or grape leather or apple leather or pineapple leather or all the other leathers that looks great unless you've just basically gone through an apprenticeship. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
like I can't just buy leather working equipment and then train people and then have master leather workers. And so we have subcontractors for a lot of stuff. Like we don't do knitting ourselves, but we started working with a knitter who we convinced to be a bit more eco-conscious. And I'm like, hey, here's my linen supplier, here's my hemp supplier, here's some suppliers who do different blends. Like, let's do some
Mm-hmm.
projects together, and so me and him geek out all the time
Yeah.
on trying to do some new stuff, and so that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to like push the envelope of like the company Natural Materials Unlimited, like we're trying to explore the unlimited potential of natural materials. And so
Yeah. Yeah, and something I really appreciate is that you are making really high quality products. You are a factory, and you are operating as a factory, but like you just said, every piece that comes out is a piece of art. It isn't just like some shit that you're sending, or and you know your clients personally, the people that are working in your, that are sitting at the sewing machine, everyone.
right.
That's that again, that's another radical act of being like building something where everyone involved, and growing something in a way that feels personal, and yeah, that's really special. So I actually really appreciate the way that you're operating.
It's conscious capitalism.
Oh, yeah, that's
I didn't
good.
make up the term. The dude who started, maybe the dude who started,
No.
I think the guy who started Whole Foods, maybe coined the term. I don't know who coined the term, but I had heard the term conscious capitalism before I read the book Conscious Capitalism. But feels good.
Mm-hmm.
I like capitalism. I think that capitalism's the best system we've created so far that make people motivated to make their lives better.
Mm-hmm.
Now, any system that has people involved with it has its flaws and criminals and justice problems, but it's what we
Yeah.
got. And
Yeah,
I
but
live in a place
there's
where
a
there was
way.
communism, and there's still lots of problems because of it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, there's a way to do everything in the with altruism, and with like justice, and fairly for and equitably for everyone.
right,
Um,
right. We could always just make the world like Burning Man and have a gift economy.
that would be really fun.
I know, I know,
Yeah.
but I
Do
also
you
need
like
to eat.
Have you been to Burning Man?
Yeah, that's one of the
Okay.
things that like that like catapulted me into this direction.
Same. I met my partner at Burning Man.
Oh,
Um,
sweet.
yeah. Yeah. Burners in the world.
Burners.
It
Yeah.
it feels good to know that there's a group of people out there that take it home with them.
Well, yeah, burners without borders, right?
Yeah, they're
Yeah, it's
cool.
so okay, so that's kind of something I didn't know about you then. So basically, and for anybody listening who gives a shit, I started this company. Now that I know I'm talking to a burner, I'm going to turn it up a bit. Um, yeah, so I started this company and I looked at the principles of Burning Man and the principles of permaculture and was like, what does a company that follows these principles look like? And that's
Yeah,
my company.
that's what I mean. Okay.
Yeah. So radical self-inclusion, radical self-expression, leave no trace, basically don't be an asshole, create a surplus, like all of these things.
Yeah,
Um, you know, yeah, that's the thing.
that's the thing. Cool. On that note, how can people find you?
You can find me for real. Anybody who wants to, my phone number is +48 662 331 212. Hit me up on WhatsApp. I don't care. I will talk to you. Anybody is an open invitation. Just hit me up on WhatsApp.
We're not going to
Or
edit that out.
no, go ahead. Go ahead. Keep it in.
Okay.
Keep the whole thing in. And no, seriously, WhatsApp. That's the
I'm
best way to get a hold of me. Or www.naturalmaterials with an s.eu is our website. I'm on LinkedIn under Mike Klepacz, MikeKlepacz. I don't really do too much of Instagram or Facebook anymore these days. I'm mostly on LinkedIn. I check my email often. If anybody has ideas for projects, I'm happy to tell them if it's going to succeed or fail. You know, I'm a pretty practical eco person. You know, I know when to use synthetic stuff, I know when to use eco stuff, but that's how you get in touch. So
Great.
my phone number or my website.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sticking around, and we'll see you next time.